welcome to the Global Impact Virtual Conference hosted by the ISTE community leaders. I am Hedreich Nichols, and I am excited to have you learn with me today with It's Me, AI, I'm the problem, it's me, a Swiftie guide to beating cheating. Now, for those of you who may not be Swifties, the alternate title is 5 Ways to Add Creativity and Increase Rigor and Engagement in Student Assessment. Not nearly as fun as It's Me. Hi, I'm the problem, it's me. But that's what we're going to talk about. You can find me at hedreich.com or at Hedreich on all social media platforms. Educational change, one small bite at a time. I'm an educator first, a consultant, a mom, a godmom, author of 6 titles, a coffee aficionado, and an advocate for better community culture and educational and public spaces. And of course, whoop whoop, middle school teacher for life. Now, I chose this title because most teachers have bad blood with ed tech, and we're still demonizing screen time as though if we'd all just go back to packets and sitting in rows, everything would just be fine. But well, it's not like that. Unfortunately, time marches on, and at the beginning of every big change, there's always a lot of pushback. Some of you may remember when Google came on the scene, and that's going to be evil, and Wikipedia is bad, and even all of those things have to do with how we use them. And for us as educators, we get the wonderful opportunity to explain to our tomorrow's adults how to use those tools effectively and in a positive way. So I'll give you a moment to think. If you could wave a magic wand to shape AI use in the classroom, what's one big thing you would do? Maybe would you ban it all together or only have teachers use it? Maybe throw out AI and tech and devices and just go back to doing things on paper again? If you think like that, you are definitely not alone. Most of the conversations I hear as an ed techie are around cheating. And it's not just for AI. There are lots of homework helpers. And if you're a math educator, you may have noticed that Google has a search button, and I can either use it to shop or I can use it pointed at my algebra homework, and it will give me the answer to my work with explanations and videos. So that could be helpful if I'm struggling, but if I never really watch the videos and learn how to work the problem, I might be in a little trouble. So, how are we going to teach our kids to use AI and all of these tools in a way that's ethical and effective? All I know since yesterday is everything has changed, and we can't put the genie back in the bottle. I am a brand new empty nester. You saw my son on that early slide. And I always think, oh, I could just start over. Again, I'm a brand new empty nester. So I'm still in the process of wishing it could just start once again. But that doesn't happen. The thing I do get to see is I get to see this great guy grow into this wonderful man and a great citizen. And I helped. So that's how we have to think that, yes, things have changed, but change can be a very, very good thing. And for our students, it's not only a good thing, it's essential that we teach them how to use these tools effectively. According to the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, careers in artificial intelligence are projected to grow 21% from 21 to 31. A large group of our kids in our 3rd and 4th grade classrooms are going to have jobs that are directly related to AI and emerging technologies, probably some technologies that we haven't yet seen. And so if we're saying, oh, they'll get it at home, or oh, they'll get it in high school, we're doing our students a disservice. And if we are thinking, I don't want them using AI in my classroom, they're just going to use it to cheat, then the problem is not them. The problem is not AI. The problem is us. Because with more creativity, with more real learning tasks, with diverse ways to show learning, Students might be able to use them to help, but they won't be able to use them to complete assignments as they can a lot these days. Let me play a quick video for you. Now, the thing about this video, if you look at it very carefully, you can see that the students are wearing hilarious anti-cheating hats. Instead of using those little trifold pieces of cardboard, the teacher had students actually make anti-cheating hats so that they couldn't copy their neighbors' papers. And while I look at the creativity and I think it's amazing, they got 1 extra point on their tests for being creative. The hats are amazing. There's a guy wearing a chainsaw hat, all kinds of great things. But I thought, my goodness, imagine if we had channeled all of that creativity into the actual task, into showing learning, instead of not having them look at their neighbor's paper. Because, well, if they can look at their neighbor's paper and cheat, then maybe the exam is not as rigorous as it should be. Now, one of my first strategies is, I'll call it speak now. And for you Swifties, you'll know where I'm going with that one. Now, you can have students collaborate or work independently to summarize texts and concepts, but not as an essay. Because if I go into Gemini right now, I can say, please give me a synthesis or a summary of the first chapter of The Giver. And it'll do that. I can say, give me a poem about The Giver. It'll even do that. But what if I say I want my kids to collaborate, write a poem together? They're not on devices, they're actually talking through it. You have your EL support because they are speaking and listening. And then they get to actually perform whatever their summarization is. They actually get to perform it. It can be to a simple beat, or maybe you've got a great beatboxer, which I am not, and you can have them say their 4 lines, their 6 lines, their 8 lines out loud in front of the classroom. Yes, it may take a lot more time. You might not have time to do that live. Then you can have them record those verses on their phones or on Chromebooks using the screencasts. All of those things can be done in a classroom, and they don't take a lot more time. But if you really want to know if they're learning, if they're actually processing the material, using collaboration, rhyme, all of those kinds of things give them a creative outlet to display learning. And the fun thing is, if you can think of vocabulary, if you don't know, they use it. If you read their research page, you'll know why using music, rhyme, and rhythm are great ways to reinforce learning and to process concepts. So let your kids write songs, prose, speeches, whatever, but give it a creative aspect so that they can actually synthesize the knowledge and then use it to create content, because we want them to be creators rather than consumers. All right. Loose lips do not sink ships. Again, Swifties, you know where I'm going with this. But loose lips do not sink ships. I am always disappointed when I observe classrooms and they say, all right, kids, I'm going to give you 2 minutes to talk about what we just learned. And they're 3rd graders and they're talking about what they did on the weekend, or maybe parroting something that they just heard, but they are very rarely engaging in actual discourse that deepens their learning. But what if we start with sentence stems? Not just I liked, I thought, but character A was like me because. Character A was unlike me because. Character A made a choice that I would never make because. Character A felt these emotions, and I felt that way when. If you give students sentence stems like that, and then instead of just thinking Pair share, think bigger. Have them do interviews, have them be The View, have them do debates, have them do a Socratic seminar. Get a talking stick so that everyone in the class has to add something. Make it a story. Let them summarize as a group one sentence at a time so that every thought has to connect to the last thought. And everyone has to speak, and you can the great thing about that is you're grading as you're going if you're still doing grades. So pair share, but give deeper conceptual prompts so that when students are talking, they're not just parroting, they're not just calling out literary terms, but they're engaging with what they learned, what they read, and processing it in a way that connects to their own identities, their own thoughts, their own feelings. Take pictures in your mind. Again, Swifties, you know where I'm going with that one. What I mean is sketchnoting. If you have not heard about sketchnoting, it's very different from doodling. It's taking notes that have a visual component or that are centered around visual components. And Carrie Balgam has a wonderful podcast about sketchnoting. You can find her on Twitter, formerly Twitter, on X, and she not only explains it, she models it. So if you watch the podcast, that's actually a visual podcast. If you watch it, you'll get to see that. But sketchnoting is an amazing way to have students not simply write words or synthesize using rephrasing what they get from the internet, or rephrasing what they get in the book, or rephrasing what you discussed as a class. They actually have to put a visual aspect, which again is dual coding. They are processing language and concepts in a deeper way. And that's not something you can ask AI to do. Okay, yes, you can ask it to create images, et cetera, if they're that savvy. But if they've got that much time, then they're probably going to beat the system anyway. So we're not going to worry about that because that's not the goal. You want to provide learning experiences that are not easy to cheat, because you don't want them to cheat on getting better learning experiences and on being able to show their learning in a way that is creative and not simply the same old rigmarole, as my grandmama used to say. In addition to sketch notes, you can use collages, rebuses. What about if you are a New York Times puzzle fan? On April Fool's Day, Connections, the New York Times Puzzle Connections, instead of using words as categories, they used emojis. The internet went mad. A lot of people didn't like it. I didn't care for it, but I was able to process visually, even though I'm more a word person. And so have your students retell a concept, retell a story in a collage. They can even use a Google slide in order to pull in different pictures and process the information in pictures instead of words. Again, this is a great exercise for helping out your ELs, helping out students who have language and letter processing issues. So when you think of words, think of how can I visualize those? How can I use graphic design? How can I give them clay? Let them tell the story in Play-Doh, especially if they are pre-K through 4. I would rather see them do that and really get a handle on the concepts, so that those are the pre-writing exercises that lead to good writing later in life. So we are at number 4. Find the real thing instead. Now, this one, I really want to take a little time. Excuse me. I want to take a little time and talk about what that looks like. First of all, writing is a skill in and of itself, and it's not a true measure of knowledge. Let's think about Helen Keller. Had she been born into a different family, not a family who was leaning into cutting edge education, she would not have been able to attain the heights that she did. Helen Keller, if you don't know who she is, you can look her up. Helen Keller was blind, could not speak, was deaf, And at that time, people said deaf and dumb because if you couldn't speak and you couldn't hear, we just assumed that, oh, well, they're dumb. And that's how we kind of still are when it comes to language. If someone doesn't speak well or doesn't write well, we assume that they are not intelligent. For example, and this is a freebie. I'm going to just digress a teeny bit. When we have students or parents who speak with accents, sometimes our natural bias is that they're not smart. But often they were doctors and lawyers in their former countries, and we assume that language is the carrier of intelligence when it's not. Language shows that we can speak well and we can write well, but it doesn't mean that we do all the things well. I can write well about engineering topics because I'm a good writer, but I can't build a thing. I'm not engineering mathematic-y at all. So again, when we think about finding the real thing, again, you know where I'm going with that, Swifties. Um, think about how we can get our students to show knowledge in performance tasks. One of my favorite one was the SDGs. If you don't know what the SDGs are, look them up. There are all of these goals that make the world a better place. So, girls in education, gender equality, clean air, clean water, basically things we all want. And I explained those. You can look up SDGs and the world's greatest lesson. I introduced the SDGs to my students, and then I let them develop projects around whatever they were passionate about. My students ensured that I would stop using plastic straws. They had a clean water. They showed pictures of seals and straws, and the way they were allowed to have a podcast. They could make a book in Book Creator. They could do a excuse me. They could do a comic strip. They could do a skit. They could do a video. They If they came up with an idea and wanted to do it, I was good with it. I got to be the yes teacher. And that was I saw such growth in them, not only as students but also as people, because they were connecting to things that they were passionate about. The parameters of the project were set: find a cause, develop a project around that cause, involve people, use your social media for good. So you had writing, you had data, you had your social studies elements, your civics education, all of your, and then your technology, of course, because you had to submit it online. So when those students were showing their learning, they weren't just showing me that they understood the SDGs. They showed me that they could write, they could document their process, they could use the timeline and make keep deadlines. They could collaborate. They could lean on each other for support. They could manage their time so that if they needed to work outside of class time, they could do that. They developed communication. They basically they would Slack each other. They didn't Slack. They Discorded and Instagrammed, or they made their choices. But all of those were skills that they were learning. And I'm going to go back to AI because if we bar those kinds of tools, those kids won't be able to use them. And because kids were allowed to use their phones, use Discord, get in touch over Instagram, I don't care, go. I had a student Instagram me once to ask me about a homework assignment. I said I'd prefer you use, my email, but fine. That's not a problem. So we want to be careful about assigning writing as the only way our kids demonstrate learning. Writing or answering questions about something written, it's just not the way. Getting back to the project. So I had students who were always enjoying freedom of choosing, but of course I also had students who were reluctant because they were so used to being boxed in and told what to do. Those students, I was there, I gave more support. We could talk about ideas. I pulled in other students and said, hey, Johnny is struggling. What do you think? What can Johnny do? All of those kinds of projects that were real life learning allowed them to learn about research, about the projects, but they demonstrated learning in so many ways. And those kinds of things you can also do together with a math and an English teacher, a science and a social studies teacher. You can collaborate so that students also don't have so many projects coming due at the same time. Now, I want to summarize that and say basically, when your students are showing knowledge, have them do anything besides writing or answering questions to show their learning. So let me go back. What is find the real thing? It is having students do literally anything besides just writing to show you that they've learned something. Have them build something, use knowledge to solve a personal class problem, whatever, literally anything. All right, I'm going to move on and go to number 5. Shake it off, shake it off. Hoo, hoo, hoo. Can't beat them, join them. What does that mean? I mean, let them use AI. They'll cheat. Yes, some of them will. As a matter of fact, children have always cheated. Adults cheat. They speed on highways. People cheat on their taxes. You can spend all of your time in an adversarial relationship ensuring that students don't cheat. Or you can put that same fervor into ensuring that kids can, like number 4, show learning by doing anything except a written task. And you can explain to them the ethical issues, AI and bias, what's good about AI, what's dangerous about AI. Have those conversations. Those are conversations they're probably not going to have at home. Those are conversations that they won't have when they get to college, and they probably won't have when they get a job. You are responsible for educating them so that they become ethical users of any emerging technology. And if you ban it, you're missing out on a wonderful opportunity. So again, if you can't beat them, join them. Use AI as a tool for writing coaching. When I say that, I mean have them write an essay, have them copy and paste it into one ChatGPT or Gemini, and then have them ask for suggestions, word choice suggestions, syntax suggestions. Can you proofread? And then have them write the essay, take some of the changes, highlight the changes they did take, and explain, post their original version and their updated version, and then explain why they accepted certain changes and why they found them better. So they become better writers in ways that you could never do with 25 or 30 kids in a classroom, because not only are they getting feedback immediately, they're getting rich feedback, being able to correct their own writing, and that's time that you generally don't have if they're writing a larger paper. A few sentences, maybe, but giving them that writing support is amazing. Have them use it for comparative research. Students can look at Google versus EBSCO versus AI, and then teach them about knowledge cutoffs. That's when the AI application stopped putting in new knowledge. Is it connected to the internet? Is it not connected to the internet? Teach them the difference between using it as a tool and using it as a crutch. What do I mean when I say that? Well, using it as a tool, for example, as a writing coach, that's a tool. Using it as a crutch is asking it to do your homework, asking it to one complete the task that they're given. Again, if they're given a task that they can complete using AI, AI is not the problem. It's me, AI. I'm the problem, it's me. I just love singing that to you. So remember to make sure that the prompts, your assignments, are things that they can richly learn and experience, as opposed to copying and pasting. And then have those conversations about what they lose when they do cheat. Ask them why If they cheat, why did you cheat? I didn't have time. My grandmom died, and I wanted to turn it in on time, but we didn't have time. Sometimes there are actual reasons that students are just completely overwhelmed, and maybe that's a space that you can also help in. But when you teach them those things, make sure that you use Purdue OWL is my favorite, or any. I think Harvard has one. Well, Harvard has one. Harvard GSE has one. There are several good AI protocol templates online, and you can cite AI just like you would cite any other source. Teach your students if they use AI to cite AI. This document was proofread by AI. Again, Purdue OWL is a great place to go to find out what are the foundations that you need to lay in your classroom when you are using AI. All right. Some of you are thinking, no, that's just way too much. I can't do all that. No, how do I get it back the way it was before? Again, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. Doesn't work like that. So we have got to lean in, and you are the person who's going to make a difference in how those students are able to use emerging technology. It's a big responsibility, but also a wonderful opportunity. Bottom line is, it's essential for educators to prioritize the ethical, efficient, responsive use of technological tools like AI so that we can prepare our kids for college and career. Isn't that what we all want to do? So here is my final album cover, Fearless, the beating cheating recap. Now, let's look at that. If you notice, you got the fearless hair flying in the wind, and this nice little oval there, that's you. So the strategies that we've talked about are to use rhythm and rhyme, have your kid beatbox a summary, have them freestyle a summary, have them write and deliver a poem in Shakespearean style. Whatever their choice is, have them use a creative, dramatic, musical element to summarize as opposed to something that they can just ask AI to do for them. Second strategy, encourage oral conversation and use expanded pair share. For example, think The View, think Big Talk Show, think News Show. Have them summarize a book chapter as news commentators and have them use the characters as actual people and some actual happening. Think of how you can use a creative element so that it's not something they can just ask Gemini to do. Now, let me remind you, a lot of those things can be done on AI, but if they're doing them as a part of classwork with collaboration, then it's less of an issue and it's also deeper learning. Next, sketch notes, emojis, and collages. Have students use Canva or Google Slides and have them pull together different images or different emojis that tell a story, and then have their partners try to read the story that they've put together. Have them do sketch notes, which are amazing. They're just basically, instead of you writing words to understand a concept to take notes, you sketch through the concept. And it's often very personal, but it gives a quote unquote picture of how they're processing the information. The next one, performance tasks over passive writing tasks. Remember this one? Have your students do literally anything except to write something and actually bubble in a sheet to show the answer that they're reading. Multiple choice, bubble sheets, small constructed response. That's great if you're teaching writing. But if you are not actually teaching or assessing writing, give your students another way, literally any other way, to show their learning besides a writing task. Finally, my very favorite, project-based learning, where students learn to use and cite AI as a part of the assignment. Once again, the SDGs are a wonderful way for students to find projects that they are passionate about, things that influence our community and impact their lives. Choose things like that so that students have not only the thought that not only they can use AI and not cheat, but they have the feeling that they are an actual part of society, a valued and valuable part of society, which they are. Our kids are brilliant. And while they're bubbling in sheets, we may not see that. But if you give kids the chance to show something that they're passionate about, show learning around something they're passionate about, you get to see brilliance. So don't let AI um, challenge you so much that you put it in the corner. Put it front and center. Be fearless. You can beat the cheating and have much richer learning experiences with your students, even with those tools, or actually, how about especially because of those tools? Once again, you can find me at Hedreich on all social media platforms, as well as hedreich.com. Thank you so much for watching. This has been the Global Impact Virtual Conference hosted by ISTE Community Leaders with Hedreich Nichols. It's me, AI. I'm the problem, it's me. One last time. Thank you again.